Okay, good morning once again formally to all of you, and thank you for attending via Facebook or via Zoom, those of you who are now in the meeting room. This is unfortunately could be our third last or second last Zoom session for this semester. In the event that we have another issue with internet again next week, then we might have one last. We might combine everything together on Tuesday like what we're doing now. So unfortunately, yesterday we had power outage, and it was a very serious issue to do with our fuse and the power cables and all that. So something beyond our control. So I've moved the presentation to today. We'll combine all seven, and from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock this afternoon, you can uh, will the makeup schedule for yesterday's 1 hour period. So if you are free between 3 and 4, you can post your comments and your questions this afternoon. And also after this presentation, if we have time, you can also share your comments and questions on the discussion forum. Okay, so with that, we will go into our first round of presentations on the theme contemporary security issues. And for this week and next week, we will look at different issues like human smuggling, drug smuggling, environmental security. So all of you have been given different questions connected to the different modern or contemporary security issues that are affecting our society today. And I will stop here. I'll give time to Ms. Felipe, who is the Group 1 representative, to share with us the answer to the assigned question. So Matilda, please go ahead with your answer. Matilda, you can share with us your answer. After Matilda, we will listen to Manu Gibson, Mr. Gibson.
Can you guys hear me? Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So our assigned question for today is, what is Thomas Ulmer Dixon's point of departure according to Dalby? Now, before we go on to answering the question, we have to understand what the term point of departure means. According to Oxford Learner's Dictionary, point of departure basically means an idea, a theory, or an event that is used to start a discussion, an activity, etc. In this case, we have to try to figure out Thomas Ulmer Dixon's um, yeah, in this case, we have to try to figure out Thomas Ulmer's discussion based on the topic environmental threats. So environmental threats, as we all know, are threats that can cause harm or damages to the environment. Environmental threats include climate change, deforestation, pollution, loss of biodiversity, etc. So according to Dalbey, different scholars over the years have tried to find out if there was evidence that environmental matters do cause conflicts. A lot of their assumption was to prove if there was or would be evidence of conflict related to environmental matters. So Thomas Ulmer Dixon, on the other end, after reviewing a huge amount of scholarly literature in disciplines, including political science, history, and economics, concluded that environmental matters are probably related to conflict in some circumstances. Therefore, there is little evidence that they had caused wars in the past, and hence little good reason to assume they would do so in the future. Um, in his discussion, he went on to investigating the key problems that might link environmental change and subnational diffuse conflict. He also emphasized that the ability of state and institution to manage social stress was important in dealing with conflict. It showed how complicated such broad notions or ideas as environmental actually are important clarity when it comes to defining what a resource is. Finally, he pointed to the need for societies to show ingenuity in responding to environmental stress. Adoption will be needed if societal breakdowns are to be avoided. However, in order for him to come up with all this discussion, he began his discussion or his point of departure with the question how environmental change leads to conflict. And I believe this answers our assigned question for this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Philippi, for representing Group 1 and for sharing with us your answer. We now move on to Mr. Gibson, who is or will be representing Group number 2. Mr. Gibson, please share your answer with us.
Can you all hear me? Okay. Before I share our answers to you all, firstly, I would like to mention that my group and I couldn't find a specific reading by Dalby regarding the research, regarding the question. However, we have used other readings by Dalby and other authors to answer our assigned question. Now, the assigned question is, how did Robert Kaplan's work crystallize the environmental security literature for the policy committee in Washington, according to Dalby? Now, firstly, let's look at what environmental security is. So the term environmental security was first used or first coined in the late 1980s. According to Dalby, 2013, page number 34, stated, and I quote, the term was simply used as a synonym for environmental protection in the sense of preventing damage to ecosystem and hence to humans. Now, however, in the coming years, when there is an increase in the concern of environmental security, people come to realize that the term encompasses much more than just environmental protection or environmental remedies. According to Dalby 2013, page 34, and I quote, environmental security also refers to environmentally induced conflicts and insecurity caused by social and political disruption related to resource shortage and degraded landscapes. Now, environmental induced conflicts refer to those that come as a result of environmental change, such as climate change and etc. Now, one example of environmentally induced conflicts is scarcity, resource scarcity. Scarcity is widely seen as a source of conflict. However, during the aftermath of the Cold War, most environmentally induced conflicts were not regarded as environmental security issues. According to Dalby 2013, there was a lack of clear social scientific evidence that this was the case. Now, Kaplan 1997 stated that environment is an aggravating element for other factors. In other words, an aggravating background noise that will inflame further and make it harder to solve issues like ethnic conflicts regional splits, etc. Now, 2007, the term was firstly used in the late 1980s, but in the 2007 marked the re-emergence of the environmental security as a high-profile issue, made both more urgent and more complicated by renewed attention to global climate change. In part, this new emphasis was because ongoing studies of climate change, summarized in fourth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2007, highlighted the seriousness of the issue, according to Delby. Now, the growing debates about environmental security centered around the how, who, and what questions. How, as in how to combat environmental security challenges, who is responsible to address the environmental security challenges, and what steps, measures, or policies should be used to combat security challenges such as climate change. Now, to answer the question, the work of Kaplan, talked more about cooperation between states to fight the changes in the environment. Kaplan 1997 stated that when talking about the issue of environment, just don't think about it as its own issue. Think about how it will interrelate with other issues like ethnic conflicts, population, or globalization, etc. Now, when we discuss the issue of environment, we are grouping towards trying to figure out what the real problem will be in the decades to come. Now, when trying to solve environmental issues, it is not just looking at each region of the world and playing each power off against the other and trying to manage the world rather than overwhelming. Trying to keep disasters to a minimum through a combination of international cooperation and other balance of power diplomacy. Kaplan 1997 stated that just because we have new problems on the horizon, or just because the old problems are far more complex because of the very environmental issues we are discussing these coming days, does not mean the diplomatic solutions will be any different than they have been in the past. Kaplan believes the best way to fight environmental issues is through cooperation. Contrary scenarios about environmental issues must go back either to the whole European balance of power politics, which is the best option to fight environmental issues. Thank you. And that's the answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson and Group 2 for sharing with us your answer. Those on Facebook and those attending via Zoom, I hope you took note of what Manu shared with us. And if you have any questions or comments, please use our forum to share. We now move on to group number 3, and Ms. Bondo is online. She's in the meeting room. We'll give her the opportunity to share an answer with us on behalf of group number 3. Ms. Bondo, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, good morning, everyone. My group's question is, what is the difference between the Neo-Malthusians and the Cornucopians, according to Gladich and Thiessen? This reading is found in, the reading which I use to answer this question is found in the book, the Routledge Handbook of Security Studies, pages 221 to 231. So to understand the difference, we'll define the terms in order. Firstly, the term Neo-Malthusians, according to Oxford reference, refers to a school of thought. Firstly, school of thought based on the ideas of Thomas Malthus, and this viewpoint grew in popularity between the 1940s and the 1960s. When population growth and economic development were particularly strong in many countries. Malthus assumed that the human population would grow at an exponential rate, while food production would only grow linearly. So Glidich and Thiessen, 2010, wrote that the general argument is that natural resources are limited on spaceship Earth, and that human rationality under stressful conditions is limited. They mentioned that population growth, the increase in consumption of resources, and harmful methods of extraction of resources combine to deplete or depreciate these resources. Thus, the neo-Malthusians see that, and I quote, the growing scarcity of renewable resources as detrimental to human security, end of quote, 2000, end of quote. The human security is mentioned here because the theory believes that as the human population becomes aware of the scarcity of resources, this would lead to stressful conditions and competitions that may lead to conflicts. So the resources considered important enough to fight for are land, fresh water, and food. More recently, climate change has been added to the list. Secondly, the cornucopians. The original term cornucopia is derived from the Latin term cornu, meaning horn, and copia, meaning plenty, and it is used as a symbol of abundance. So Glidich and Thiessen, 2010, wrote that the cornucopians recognize that natural resources are theoretically limited, but also stressed that natural resources are more abundant than realized by the neo-Malthusians. The cornucopians' main argument is that resources can be substituted and recycled when necessary, and that technological development may make it possible to consume less. So they argue that the relative importance of renewable resources decreases as technology is advancing, mainly due to human ingenuity and demands for the market economy. So a very important point that they stressed under this is that if resources are scarce to the point where people fight for them, it is because politics has interfered. So to answer our question, my group members and I think that the main difference between the neo-Malthusians and the cornucopians is that the neo-Malthusians, on one hand, think that population growth and human demand for resources may lead to total depletion or decrease in these resources, while the cornucopians think that all these, the ideas that the Malthusians propose are theoretically, they are only in theory, but if the human population come up with sustainable ways by using recent technology, resources won't be that completely depleted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo, for sharing the answer with us on behalf of Group 3. We now have Lenora with us. Lenora will be representing group number 5. So we will give this opportunity to Lenora to share with us the answer to the assigned question. Ms. Welly, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, for our question, group 5, our question is, what is your understanding of the concept of responsibility to protect as described by Bellamy? So firstly, the concept of responsibility to protect come about after the failure or ineffective system of the Westphalian sovereignty. Now, Westphalian sovereignty refers to the 1648 Peace of Westphalian, which is commonly reckoned to have instituted a world order based on the right of sovereigns to govern their own people in whatever way they saw fit. However, in the 20th century, there were about 262 million people were killed by their own government. For example, the recent killing in East Timor, Sudan, and the 1994 Rwanda genocide. Now, according to Bellamy 2008, page 423, at the UN's Millennium Summit in 2000, Canada's Prime Minister Jean Catherine announced the creation of an International Commission on Intervention and State Sovereignty, also known as ICISS, and it is charged with the task of finding a global consensus on humanitarian intervention. And in 2001, the commission, chaired by Gareth Evans and Mohad Shanaun, delivered a landmark report entitled The Responsibility to Protect. Therefore, the commission argued that states have the primary responsibility to protect their citizens. And when they are unable or unwilling to do so, or when they deliberately terrorize their citizens, the principle of non-intervention yields to international responsibility to protect. So Bellamy 2008 stated that the concept of responsibility to protect, or known as R2P, was intended as a way of escaping the logic of sovereignty versus human rights by focusing not on what interveners are entitled to do, but on what is necessary to protect people in their need and the responsibilities of various actors to provide such protection. Now, the R2P has three elements identified by the ICISS, and their responsibility to prevent. And this involves early warnings or tackling roots and direct prevention and the responsibility to protect. The other element is responsibility to react. It is the role of R2P to avoid future disasters. And the third is responsibility to rebuild, not to rebuild a society by returning it to its pre-war, but to transform a society into something new. Now, how the R2P is being put into practice, the two most noticeable ways are in the fields of conflict prevention and the protection of civilians by peace operation. Conflict prevention, the R2P prevent the outbreak and escalation of violent conflict, and protection of civilians help strengthen the idea that peacemakers must be prepared to use force to protect endangered people irrespective of what their mandates say. So from what Bellamy has described about the concept of responsibility to protect, and from our understanding, sovereignty derives from the people within a state, and consent may be withdrawn if sovereigns abuse its citizens or fails to guarantee their basic rights. And the notion of ICISS comes in when states are unwilling or unable to protect their citizens from grave harm. And the principle of non-interference yields to the responsibility to protect, because the very foundation of sovereignty and international society are individual human rights. So the responsibility to protect, or R2P, is based on the principle of non-intervention of sovereign states, meaning the practice of not becoming involved in the affairs of other countries. And as a result, international society has a responsibility to ensure that sovereigns fulfill their duties to their citizens by preventing and reacting to cases of genocide, mass killing, and ethnic cleansing, and helping transform societies afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Welly, for representing your group and sharing with us your answer related to the norm of responsibility to protect by Alex Bellamy. So you've heard from Mr. Gibson, from Ms. Philippi, and from Ms. Bondo and Ms. Welly. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there are any areas that are not clear, if you have questions related to these areas, then please make sure you post on our forum so they can respond accordingly. We will now move on to Ms. Tukiki. Ms. Tukiki will be representing group number 7. Annabella, please go ahead with your answer.
Yeah, can you all hear me? Okay, so I'll be representing Group 7 to present our given question. The question reads, what is the connection between transnational crime and international security according to Piccirilli? So firstly, I will define transnational crime and international security, then I will give my answer to the question. So what is transnational crime? So in 2000, the UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime defined an offense as transnational if it met one of these 4 conditions. First, if it is committed in more than one state. Second, if it is committed in one state, but a substantial part of its preparation, planning, direction, or control takes place in another state. Third, if it is committed in one state, but involves an organized criminal group that engage in criminal activities in more than one state. And finally, if it is committed in one state, but has substantial effect in another state. So transnational crimes therefore involves offenses that cross international borders on or which affects the interest of more than one state. It can be distinguished from offenses that occur within a single national jurisdiction and offenses that is recognized in international law and against the world community. The UN has identified several different categories of transnational crime. To name a few: drug trafficking, trafficking in persons, organ trafficking, trafficking in cultural property, counterfeiting, money laundering, terrorist activities, sea piracy, and environmental crime. So individuals working alone may commit transnational crimes, but more often they involve organized groups or networks of individuals working in more than one country. So there is no single structure under which transnational organized crime groups function. They vary from hierarchies to clans, networks, and cells, and may evolve into other structures as well. So transnational organized crime poses a significant and growing threat to national and international security, with their implication for public safety, public health, democratic institution, and economic stability across the globe. It jeopardizes our border security, endangered our health through human trafficking and counterfeit pharmaceuticals, and seek to corrupt officials domestically and abroad. For example, transnational crimes drains potential tax revenues from the coffers of the state, while forcing the state to dedicate more financial and human resources to border control and law enforcement. So transnational crime can also impact upon a country's soft power. So on the other hand, what is international security? So the concept of international security as security among states belongs to the 20th century. The threats are no longer primarily coming from states. Threats are coming from ethnic groups obsessed by hyper-nationalism, from criminal gangs, mafiosis or mafias governance, from epidemics, AIDS, terrorism, dangerous food, from poverty, from economic mismanagement, from overpopulation, from failed states, from flow of refugees, and most importantly, from pollution and the effects of pollution or the irrigation and destruction of nature and the diversification of nature. So international security, also called global security, is a term that refers to the measures taken by states and international organizations such as the United Nations, European Union, and other states to ensure mutual survival and safety. These measures included military action and diplomatic agreements such as treaties and conventions. So international security aimed at issues of power politics and international order, peace and war, and strategy and diplomacy. So its main focus is the phenomena of and theoretical reflection on violence in its broader context. Now, to answer the question, what is the connection between transnational crime and international security? So according to the author Piccirilli, by its nature, transnational organized crime is a collective action problem, meaning that transnational crime is an issue that needed collective approach by all states combined. So transnational crime is by nature connected to international security because they both has operations internationally. This is shown by the fact that transnational crime groups operate across borders and states cannot fight these groups alone.
This has made the fight against transnational organized crime an issue of international security based on two circumstances or factors. First is crime groups are often quick to take advantage of differences in legal codes or state capabilities across borders to accomplish their needs. For example, migrant smugglers often use countries with lax immigration control as transit states, especially those who enjoy visa-free access to destination states. The second is it challenges the norms and institutions that regulate the state system. For example, money laundering and financial fraud force states to support more stringent regulations that run counter to the laissez-faire demands of the international markets. Laissez-faire basically is an economic system in which transactions between private groups of people are free from any form of economic intervention, such as subsidies deriving from special interest groups. So overall, the circumstances of factors mentioned does not happen in just one state, but like I mentioned earlier, other states as well. So this shows how transnational crime spreads quickly, affecting the people, economic and politics of states. So as it increases, it becomes, as I have mentioned earlier, an issue of the international security. So in one way or the other, transnational crime is somewhat connected to the international security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tukiki, for a very comprehensive answer. I've written a blog yesterday and submitted for publication in the Australia Pacific Security College blog, and it's about transnational crime, in particular drug smuggling. And I did a comparison between Tonga and PNG, and then the cases of methamphetamine in Port Moresby involving Jamie Peng and Anthony Yani. And yeah, it's really worrying, the use of methamphetamine and drug smuggling. And one of the recommendations was for a regional approach based on the Boer Declaration. So transnational crime, especially drug smuggling, is becoming a really big issue now. PNG is now not only a transit point, but production point as well. We're producing methamphetamine and we're supplying it to the Australian market. And also we are consuming it locally in Port Moresby, and I don't know about Alatau and other parts of the country, Lae and Madang, but they're selling methamphetamine in Moresby and using it. So it's a very dangerous trend. Once again, thank you, Annabella and Group 7. Now we listen to Group 6. Mr. Rudolph is the representative of Group 6, and he will share with us the answer to the assigned question. Please, Abel, go ahead.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. The question that we were tasked to answer is how do chemical weapons differ in their lethality and the way they cause injury according to Witts? Okay, first of all, before I go on to answer the question, just a few notes here. Take note of. The first one is chemical weapons are so powerful that they can cause deaths, injuries, and destructions compared to other weapons. So yeah, chemical weapons are very dangerous. The other thing is about lethal. When something is being lethal, it means that it has the ability to kill. It can cause massive destruction to the ecosystem. It can cause massive deaths. So if something's being lethal, yeah. So now, first of all, before I go on also to answer the question, I just want to define chemical weapons. So we must have a fair idea, understanding about chemical weapons and how destructive they are. So the first definition, according to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, a chemical weapon is a chemical used to cause intentional death or harm through its toxic properties. Like munitions, devices, and other equipment specifically designed to weaponize toxic chemicals also fall under the definition of chemical weapons. So in general understanding, chemical weapons, they come in the form of gases. So a good example of a chemical weapon is of a toxic chemical contained in a delivery system such as a bomb or artillery shell. So chemical weapons has three types. There are three types of chemical weapons. So the first one is toxic chemicals and the precursors. Toxic chemicals and the precursors. So toxic chemicals are defined as any chemicals which through its chemical action on life processes can cause death, temporary incapacitation, or permanent harm to humans or animals. This includes all such chemicals regardless of their origin or of their method of production, and regardless of whether they are produced in facilities, in munitions, or elsewhere. So precursors are chemicals that are used for the production of chemical weapons. Okay, that is the first one, toxic chemicals and the precursors. The second type of chemical weapon is munitions or devices. Any munitions or devices specifically designed to inflict harm or cause death through the release of toxic chemicals are defined as munitions or devices. And among these could be mortars, artillery shells, missiles, bombs, mines, or spray tanks. That is the second second type of chemical weapon, munitions or devices. So the third type of chemical weapon is equipment directly in connection with munitions and devices. Equipment directly in connection with munitions and devices. So any equipment specifically designed for use directly in connection with the employment of the munition and devices identified as chemical weapons. I will repeat again. The third type of chemical weapon is equipment directly in connection with munitions and devices. So any equipment specifically designed for use directly in connection with the employment of the munitions and devices identified as chemical weapons. So here are some examples, a few examples of chemical weapons. The first one is fully developed chemical weapons and the components of such weapons when restored separately. For example, is a binary ammunition. The second one is chemicals used to produce weapons. Examples, the precursors. The third one is chemicals used to cause intentional death or harm. Fourth one, items with peaceful civilian uses when used or intended for chemical weapons use. The fifth one is munitions and devices intended for delivery of toxic chemicals. And the final one is the equipment directly in connection with aforementioned munitions and devices. So to answer the question, how do chemical weapons differ in their lethality and the way they cause injury according to words? So here the response is chemical weapons differ in their lethality because they are in the form of gas and can quickly spread through wind blows. A few droplets of chemicals absorbed through the skin can paralyze and cause death in minutes. So chemical weapons can suffocate the victim and cause massive burning inside the victim's internal organs and skin. The result is always death. And chemical weapons are often referred to as gases, as I've already explained. And chemical weapons can have a massive destruction on the ecosystem. Just to give an example for us to understand the use of chemical weapons and how lethal they are and the way they cause injury. Take for example, if there was to be a war between USA and Indonesia, and USA chose to drop a chemical weapon on Indonesia, just like how they dropped two atomic bombs in Japan. So the neighboring countries of Indonesia will be affected. So that means the population of Papua New Guinea and its ecosystem will be severely affected even we are not part of the war. So that's how chemical weapons differ in their lethality and the way they cause injury. So that's all from me. That's all I've prepared to present on behalf of Group 6 to answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rudolph. It's very scary, the potential that these chemical weapons have and the magnitude of destruction they will cause if used against a particular state or people group. So yeah, it's something that all of us should take note and be concerned about and make sure we talk about it so countries don't use it against other countries and cause damage to many innocent lives. So we will now conclude with Ms. Longkai. Ms. Longkai will represent a group number 4, and she will share with us the answer to the assigned question. So Elena, please go ahead.
Can you? Hello, you can hear me? Okay. So I'll be representing group 4. The question I'm going to answer is what is energy security according to Clay? So the answer to this question is found in Paul D. Williams' book, 2008, chapter 32. The name of the book is Introduction to Security Studies. Okay, so I'll introduce the topic, give a highlight on the importance of energy, and then go on to answering my question. So first of all, energy security is a newly emerged form of security type that gained attention just a few years ago, and now figures prominently in the policy discourse of major government officials. So it is one of the forms of security that command the attention of policymakers and citizens around the world. Among them, national security, international security, human security, economic security, and environmental security. So in order to understand energy security, we need to know what energy is and the importance of energy. So before I go on to defining energy security, it is necessary to highlight the centrality of energy in all human endeavors. So according to Clay, even the most primitive humans have to consume food in order to obtain the caloric energy that will enable them to hunt, get more food, and other essential necessities like building shelter, defending themselves against predatory animals and hostile tribes. So Clay also stated that in more complex societies, this means that they are in great need of more energy to produce food and energy, and to construct cities, fortifications, factories, ships, railroads, and so on. And so basically, the more complex and productive the society is, the greater its need for energy. That is why without adequate supply of basic fuels, a complex society cannot maintain a high rate of industrial output, provide a decent standard of living to its citizens, and defend itself against competing powers. That's according to Clay. And this is especially true with the value of petroleum in US, which according to Luca, as cited in Clay 2008, occupies a position of singular importance in the American economy and a way of life. American economy and their way of life. And thus, it is from this perception of energy's singular importance to the functioning of modern industrial societies that the concept of energy security springs. So in simple terms, energy refers to the basic fuels that are essential to keep the society up and running. And the sum of all of these energy sources include oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear power, hydropower, and traditional sources such as wood and charcoal. So in most Western countries, private companies are largely responsible for the task of procuring, producing, and delivering energy to consumers for the pursuit of profit. However, because the acquisition and delivery of such energy goods affects our whole nation's economic health, governments, they tend to play a significant role in the key requirements of the procurement process of our energies. Okay, so thus the intervention of state authorities in the management of acquisition and distribution is typically justified in the terms of energy security. So that is ensuring that appropriate incentives and policy instruments are in place to impel private firms to take the steps needed to produce and deliver adequate supplies of energy to meet the nation's requirements. When the private sector proves unequal to this, crucial task, the state must be prepared to step into the breach. So coming back to the question, that is for energy. Coming back to the question about what is energy security according to Claire. So according to Claire, energy security has a variety of meanings depending on the outlook of a particular state involved. So it does not come with only one definition. But the most general definition that I identified is the one provided by Tutor to you 2021, which reads, for all states on planet that I included that part, but energy security refers to the ability of a nation to secure sufficient, affordable, and consistent energy supplies for its domestic, industrial, transport, and military requirements. It means that current and future energy needs of a particular nation have a high probability of being met, irrespective of political and economic instability. So in practice, energy security is understood to encompass the dual function of ensuring procurement of sufficient supplies of energy to meet the fundamental needs, as well as ensuring their unhindered delivery from the point of production to the ultimate consumer. So these dual functions have proven very challenging in recent years as the worldwide demand for energy has increased, and it is expected to be even more demanding in the years to come. So another definition that I can come up with for energy security according to the different states and how they attain energy is that energy security is, Okay, it's that the fact that I already mentioned that energy security includes oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear weapons, hydropower, traditional sources such as wood and charcoal. So as indicated by Claire, policymakers, they will feel compelled to increase the net support energy in all its forms to satisfy rising demand in the decades ahead. But these officials, they also seek to avoid over-reliance on any one or two of these sources of energy. So lest a future shortage of those materials causes a severe energy crisis and resulting economic disaster, policymakers are also aware that growing concern over global climate change could well lead to the future restrictions on the use of these fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. So whose consumption typically results in the release of carbon dioxide and overheat, trapping greenhouse gases, attempts of ensuring adequate supplies to meet our future needs. Therefore, energy security comes to mean diversifying states' primary sources of fuel and investing in a climate-friendly alternative, especially with renewable sources of energy such as solar, wind power, and biofuels. So this is for states that are environment-friendly. So the second major energy challenge is to ensure unhindered delivery of crucial supplies, which is also growing more demanding in the coming years because of the global energy supply system has become a highly globalized. And an example is that with numerous suppliers around the world contributing oil, natural gas, coal, uranium, and electricity to extended, overstretched, and often fragile networks of pipelines, transmission lines, and maritime trade routes. Maritime trade routes, apart from the normal wear and tear of overburden to infrastructure, these networks are often vulnerable to attack by terrorists, insurgents, pirates, and criminal bands. So this makes the safe delivery of energy increasingly problematic. And thus, with the growing demand of energy, expense worldwide, and the reliance on these far-flung networks grow along with it. So energy security will increase its emphasis on the protection of global delivery systems. So because of this, countries, they also worry about the threats to the unhindered delivery of their energy supplies. And so this leads to, in some instances, to a decision to employ military force in the protection of overseas supply routes. And for other states that rely on the considerable extent on important sources of supply, those that they rely on important sources of energy supply. Energy security also operates a significant foreign policy dimension in terms of maintaining friendly ties with the key foreign providers. So in this case, the principal objective of its overseas diplomacy is to establish and sustain friendly ties with the key providers of oil, gas, and other fuels, and thereby facilitating the procurement of these fuels by companies linked to the home country. And in many cases, the maintenance of such ties has become major responsibility of senior government officials from the president or prime minister on down. So an example is for President George W. Bush, for example. He conducted several meetings with President Vladimir Putin of Russia to discuss increased energy cooperation between the two countries, while President Hu Jintao of China has made several trips to Africa in pursuit increased investment opportunities for Africa energy films. That's back in 2008. And the last definition of concept of energy security is to do with efforts to reduce reliance on a single major supplier that uses its dominant position to extract concessions or otherwise manipulate its highly dependent clients. So this concept defines energy security in countries that are highly dependent on for their energy supplies on one or two suppliers only, but are weak in bargaining position in respect to them and hence vulnerable to political pressure. So an example that Clay came up with is of the former Soviet republics that rely on Russia for such much of their oil and natural gas suppliers, especially Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, and Baltic states. On several recent occasions, Russians have threatened to, or have actually cut off the flow of energy to these states, producing widespread economic hardship. And ostensibly, these actions were prompted by disputes over the pricing of energy, but most Western observers, they believe that Moscow undertook such action to punish an unfriendly government or to extract political concessions from the nation involved. So that was an example provided by Clay. So for these countries, then energy security has come to mean reducing their dependency on a single provider that can employ its dominant position in order to inflict punishment for an unwelcome decision or extract concessions of some sort. So those are the definitions that I came up with for to answer the question, proof for question. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lonkai, for a very comprehensive answer. I believe your peers have now, you've helped them to understand the concept of energy security. So now the question is to you future policymakers, do we need a policy to help us manage energy security or an energy security policy? That's something that we should discuss more often in the future, in the years to come, as people go out and try to contribute towards nation building. So apart from energy security, we've heard our presenters talk about environmental security and transnational crime and or transnational criminal activity. So there's quite a lot of different national, transnational or contemporary security issues that we as policymakers and future leaders and citizens should be concerned and try to look at our country, look at our national security policy. Does it capture all these different threats posed by the environment, by transnational criminal groups, and by different energy cartels? The cartels are controlling the price. Now we have the price of fuel is 5 kina for petrol and diesel. It's because of the Russia-Ukrainian crisis and all these geopolitical issues are affecting, us at the individual level when you look at our daily lives and citizens as taxpayers. So we'll stop here. We'll stop here. We'll stop here and I'll let you people go and do your commenting. And I thank all the presenters and thank you all the attendees. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your time and apologies that this afternoon I'll take your time from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I said I will not take up your personal time, but due to circumstances beyond our control, this afternoon 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, if you have time, please make sure you contribute your comments and questions so I can tally and then add up your marks. So I'll stop here. Thank you once again for all our presenters, and attendees on Facebook as well as Zoom. You all have a good day and I'll see you again next week, Monday and Tuesday for our final round of presentations on contemporary security issues. So after that, we'll move on to our social media awareness campaign. And just a reminder that I'm free for consultation this week and next week, Monday to Friday. Lunch hour, I will not be available during the lunch hour period, as well as from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. I'll be I'll go out to pick up my kids from school. So 2:30 to 3 o'clock, I will not be available, and 12:30 to 1:30. But before that, in between the time period, you can send me an email to notify me when you want us to, or let me know when you want us to meet. So Monday to Friday. Please make sure you talk with your group members and appoint the time. All right, so I'll stop here. You have from now 11:30 to 12:30 to post, and then you have in the afternoon and also 3 hours next week to share your post and to share your comments and your questions. All right. Okay, everyone. Have a good day. Take care.